Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Children's Education and Housing Scrutiny Committee meeting. I'm going to invite James to give us the apologies.
Thank you. So, through you, Chair, we have apologies for non-attendance from Councillor Scott Packer.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, we move on to item 3. And we're going to, I just invite you all to agree the minutes from our last meeting on the 10th of June 2025. That me? Not as yet. We just agree the minutes. Okay.
So, would you care to put your signature on there?
If I, moving on to item 4, announcements, if I can ask everybody, we are being live webcast, so if I can just ask all of us to use the microphone so we're all heard and we're all clear. If I can just remind everybody to either put your phones on silence or turn them off completely, that would be appreciated too. I just want to welcome everybody to our second committee meeting, really, and just remind us all that there are many new councillors here, so just bear with us and bear in mind that that we may not be fully up to speed with some of what is happening. So if we have things explained to us in a fairly basic manner, I think that would be appreciated by us all as well. And I want to thank every committee member and the officers here tonight for being flexible, because our meeting was on the 16th of September, but was obviously cancelled for another meeting and is now rearranged for this evening, the 2nd of October. So thank you all for your flexibility. Item 5, I'm going to invite you, Mrs. Lineker, to come up and speak to us about Billingbrook School. Okay, you have 3 minutes, Mrs. Lineker. Thank you.
On. Ooh.
Still loading.
Ooh, sorry. Bring it closer. I don't think I need this much, but I've got a loud voice and I'm going to use it. Send children, even Billingbrook and other schools, are waiting really badly for assessments. It's the assessments that take too long. I wanted to see the MP regarding, that's my reader, regarding several issues. Even in older care, the assessments are taking too long. That's for older children, older adults, and older and send children within schools as well. Normal schools are waiting for their assessments, and sometimes the send children haven't heard about any schools. Billingbrook School, we saved that from closing down. I don't care who it was, what political party, send children matter. And I hope they get help at Billingbrook to move over to the Salvation Army. They have got planning permission, but I'm glad I saved that as a school governor. What is happening to the school governors these days? Are they not sticking up for the children? I need to know that. And the MP, why didn't he turn up at the meeting at Bellinge with me? His parliamentary team came, and I'm not very happy about that as an USDAR member. Now, many years ago, we had a scrutiny panel that did everything for children, especially abuse, as I said last time. I don't want to be too long over
You
that.
have 1 more minute, Mrs. Lineker.
Right, just a minute, I'm coming to an end. I need to know why the MP never turned up on several issues I wanted to speak about. So I started to cry. That's all I done, and that's all I wanted to say. I've got a photo here of my nephew. I have showed Hayley the photograph. He got no help. My sister got no help. Send children need help immediately, not later, now.
Thank you, Mrs. Lineker.
Sorry, I'm pretty late.
We can't obviously speak for the MP, Mr. Reader, Mike Reader. We will move on, and we are going to address SEND tonight. So I invite Ben Pearson to bring forth the priority action plan for SEND.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're going to do a joint effort this evening. That's all right. So myself, Mel Barnett, obviously our DCS, Miranda from our Integrated Health Board, and Kim Stevenson from our Parent Forum as well. We're going to do a bit of a join-up, quadruple act, if that's okay. I think Mel's going to start us off. Okay?
Thank you. What I'm going to do to begin with is just go through some, I suppose, wider context in terms of the local area, just to make sure that everybody is clear in terms of what the arrangements are relating to SEND. So if we could move on to it's probably going to be the second slide now. And I'm aware members have had these slides in their pack. So I'll talk a little bit about local context and the local area partnership, and then we'll go on to talk about the priority actions and the achievements that we've had to date and the next steps. And then we'll conclude talking about our children and young people, how they're engaging within our SEND and Alternative Provision Board. And then we've just got some updates in terms of additional provision that's been provided within West Northants. I'm not going to read all of the slides, but I suppose that the things to highlight from this slide is the Council is the lead agency for the local area partnership. And when I say local area partnership, that is health, education and social care, who are, as it says on the slides, key strategic partners. We do have a SEND and Alternative Provision Partnership Improvement Board, and that was as a result of the inspection that we had, and that is chaired by an independent chair by the name of Mrunal Sisodia, who I have to say has really brought some rigour to the board. So very welcome chair for us. What I will say to give assurance is that all statutory and key partners are engaged. We do meet on a monthly basis. We have a very clear action plan linked to our priorities, and partners are held to account, which includes the council. When I say partners, I'm including the council in that, are held to account in terms of the actions that we need to take. And I think more importantly for me, and Kim's here this evening, we do have our recognised Para-Carer Forum, which is West Northants Voices in Partnership. They're actively engaged in all levels, and what I would say again to give reassurance, and I will let Kim add to this if she wants to, I think in terms of co-production with parents, we're very strong in this local area. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, very strong. We are literally involved in every single work stream and every single board meeting at every level, even to the point now the comms are coming past us before they go out to parents, because they need to be accessible as well. It's all very well the work going on behind the scenes, but parents need to hear about that in an accessible manner as well.
Thank you. And what I would say is we're really grateful to the parents that obviously Kim attends, and we've got a number of other members, but they are really an important partner in terms of the improvements that we need to make. If I just talk about the Send and Alternative Provision Improvement Board, again, I'm not going to go through all of that, but clearly we have to adhere to the principles of the Children and Families Act, the Send Code of Practice. Members will be aware of all of the information, context within nationally in terms of policy, and I think it's fair to say that we've waited a long time to know what the direction of travel is, and we're still not sure what that is. We have been told that we will get further updates in October, which is obviously this month. So I think, and going back to speaker earlier, I think we would all agree, none of us would disagree, that SEND children are a priority. I think there are some real challenges that we face locally and nationally, and when I come on to the priority actions, we'll talk a bit more in terms of the work that we're doing around that. And the board, as I've said before, monitors the progress against the priority actions. If we can move on to the next one. Thank you. Council responsibilities are really clear. That links into education provision, and again we'll talk at the end in terms of some of the schools and special educational needs resource bases that have been opened. The challenges I suppose we have, and Miranda will talk about that and we'll certainly talk about that, is capacity. Demand. It's known locally and nationally that there's been a significant increase in the requests for assessments for children with EHCPs, which does cause a delay. We know that nationally, completion of education, health and care plans is just under 50%. You know, we would all be wanting to achieve 100%, not 50%. So there is a lot of information and a lot of responsibilities, I should say, that we do have as a council. The other important area that we do have our SENDIAS team, which is Special Educational Needs and Disability Information and Advice Service. And they obviously support parents as well as the Parent Carer Forum. Okay, if we can move on to the next one, please. So independent chair, and I've touched on this, so as I said, Marunal Sisodia is our independent chair. He does rigorously hold all board members to account, and what we have got now is feedback from the board in terms of that discussion, so that does go on our local offer. So we're very mindful that we need to be transparent in terms of those conversations at the board and making sure that members of the public see that, so that does go on the local offer after every meeting. I think it's fair to say that there is a balance of challenge, but equally there's also got to be that balance with how do we progress with, and we know funding challenges, we know capacity challenges, but ultimately we know that we've got a child and young person that we need to support. So we do have those conversations at every meeting. The other role of the board is to support resolution of escalated risks, and I would say that the biggest risk we face currently is around demand and capacity to meet that demand. And equally, although we won't touch on high needs block this evening, the real challenge is in terms of funding that local authorities receive to support children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. And then the other thing which the independent chair is very well cited on are the stocktake meetings and deep dives, and we'll go on to talk about those in a little while, but we are monitored regularly by the DFE and by NHS England in terms of the progress that is being made, and we are expecting our monitoring inspection any time between now and spring. Okay, if we can go on to the next one. So in terms of the Send and Alternative Provision Priority Action Plan, members are probably aware that the inspection was in March 24, so we're about 18 months into the work that we've been doing. The inspection is of the local area partnership, so as I say, that's the council and the Integrated Care Board. It's not an inspection of just the council. We know that we've got 16,000 children and young people in Northamptonshire, so we're talking about an awful, that's not with education, health and care plans, by the way, that's children with special educational needs and disabilities. The priority action plan that was pulled together with partners in co-production with Parent Carer Forum was signed off by the DFE and NHS England, and as I say, they monitor that on a regular basis. And as I've just mentioned, we are expecting our full re-inspection, our monitoring inspection at any point between now and spring, and then we will get a full re-inspection, which will be in 2027. Right. I think I'll do this slide and then I'm going to hand over to my colleagues so that you don't have to listen to my voice anymore. So if I just talk about the priority action plan areas. So what you'll see in front of you on the screen are the 5 areas that were identified as being priority actions. And what we will talk through over the next half an hour or so is we'll talk through in terms of the actions that we've taken related to those areas and the progress also that we've made. So the first one is around developing a joint strategic needs assessment and joint commissioning strategy. The second one, which I think is probably, well, the second, and they're all important, but I would say definitely the second and third one are probably the most important, which is addressing the length of time that families have to wait, and equally making sure that our plans are of good quality, they're accurate, and they contain key information from all partners. Another area of priority, which the bottom 2 relate mainly to health, and Miranda will talk about that progress. Addressing the current waiting times for speech and language therapy, mental health services and neurodevelopmental assessments, and finally improving the joint approach to speech, language and communication needs. And again, we'll talk in more detail in terms of the progress that we've made on those areas. Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Ben to talk about priority action 1.
So I'll take through it in a little bit more detail now about exactly what we've done in the first couple of priorities. And Kim and Miranda, please jump in as and when you want to. And then the last couple of priorities, as Mel said, more specifically health-led. And Miranda, I know you'll be able to talk to those. So the first one, some of this sounds really dry, but it is critically important if we are going to make a difference for children and young people long term. So a joint strategic needs assessment is exactly what that says. It is joint. It is not about the council saying this is what we need to do or this is what the demand for our services coming through is. It's not about health doing that. It's not about social care. It's around looking at children holistically and understanding what the needs and the demand for services are longer term so that we can work more effectively to improve outcomes. And especially as the demographics change across West Northants with increased demand, as Mel has said, with changes to birth rates, etc. What we've been able to do in the last 18 months is really look at the known demand for specialist services that we have, looking right the way back to birth data and children as they are born and as they are assessed, particularly through health, and then look at how we will need to organise ourselves and structure ourselves and the services that we're going to need over the next 5 to 10 years. That's what that JSNA does. Really massive piece of work to look at the complexity of needs across the whole of our patch. That was signed off by the Health and Wellbeing Board in the summer. So a lot of work that goes into that JSNA of understanding needs properly. That comes first. What comes second then is a joint commissioning strategy. And again, it does what that says on the tin. It is joint. It's not about the council saying this is how we will commission services or this is how we will use our resources. It's around health, social care, education and other partners looking at how we jointly commission to make the best use of the public purse and all of the resources that we have at our disposal. It's not just about money. It's about people, it's about buildings, it's about all of the assets and the resources that we have. Again, that joint commissioning strategy was signed off by the Health and Wellbeing Board in the summer. We've got a detailed action plan underneath that says exactly what we're going to do over the next couple of years in order for that commissioning to drive improvements for our children and our families. So it is a bit dry, this priority, but they are critically important building blocks for us to go and make a difference for all of the children and families that we have. Some of the other pieces within this priority action plan, as Mel has already said, we've got a really robust governance structure now through that SEND board, through work streams that sit underneath, as Kim has already said, parents involved at the board and at every single work stream underneath. That governance, led by Mrunal, who awarded an MBE for his services to children with SEND, nationally one of the biggest voices and advocates for children with SEND. He's the sort of person that we really wanted to bring into West Northants to help to drive us forward, and he really is helping to drive us forwards. So the governance is really strong. We're also undertaking that workforce development survey. So again, not just looking at money, but looking at the assets and the people that we have and how, by working across the partnership, we can improve and support our staff to really drive those improvements forward. And lastly, in order to really look at individual young people and at cohorts of young people, we've had to develop data sharing agreements so we can share information across services to really look at, one example I will use, and it links back to comments made earlier, do we know children waiting for diagnosis? Are we able to offer different levels of support through education, for example, to stop some children being suspended, being their attendance dropping at school if we know they're awaiting a diagnosis? Once that data sharing agreement is signed off, we will be able to do that in a much more targeted and informed way. So big building blocks that will help us make a difference long term in this priority area. Kim, Miranda, I don't know if you want to add anything else before I move to the second one.
I was just going to say the data sharing has recently been signed. It is signed off now, and I would say that's something that we really pushed for as well, because we really wanted to know, how do we find those children that are on 6 different waiting lists and nobody is engaged with that family? Is fine for the children that are on 4 waiting lists and they've actually reached the top on 2 and there's somebody engaging with that family, there's somebody supporting them. But what about those children that are literally on every waiting list with no support? So that data sharing agreement, although it looks like a tiny little piece, from our point of view, we really pushed and said that's key. We need to find those families that have got nothing. So that I actually said in the board meeting, can I do a little happy dance on the table, please? That was a big ticket item on our agenda.
Yeah. Miranda, you okay for me to move on?
No, I'm happy for you to move on.
Right, to move on to the next priority. So number 2, and number 2 and number 3 do dovetail, as Mel said earlier, so I'll try and quickly cover both of these and then bring colleagues in. At the time of our inspection, we had nearly 1,000 children waiting for their assessments, as in that the assessments were ongoing. One of the things within the council we knew that we needed to do was to really invest in those teams to actually undertake those assessments. So we've been able to recruit an additional 17 caseworkers, those people that really lead and are at the very front, and those people in direct contact with families, and additional management positions, to get additional staff in to actually have the capacity to manage the demand that's coming through the door. That still remains a pressure. There is a lot of demand, but we now have a lot more people to meet that need. At the same time, in us reorganising our services, we brought in new leadership in this area, and we are completely redesigning the way that we do the work that we do to make sure it's the most efficient, effective, and is built on good practice nationally. That's taken a lot of work to train and sometimes to retrain staff to do things in a very consistent and a very clear way. Really pleased to say the trajectory for clearing that backlog, that will now be cleared by January. That's been a long time coming. There's a lot of work there. We have made the commitment to always work chronologically. We will deal with assessments as they come into the council. What we won't do is quickly do new assessments to make our figures look better. That's not fair on children and families. So we're working through this in a very methodical and very logical way to clear that backlog. Some colleagues will be aware as well, and I think I touched on this in the first time I came to speak to this committee, really big pressure around educational psychology assessments. And just to be clear, every single child that has an education, health and care plan must have an educational psychology assessment as part of that process. We are now able to complete 80% of those within that 6-week timescale. 2 years ago, that figure was 0. So huge push in terms of investment in staff, but also the support for staff to enable them to do that work. We are using all of the work that coming through this new team now to really inform the way that we continually improve going forwards. And one of the things we've tried to do to not to specifically address education, health and care plan requests, but to try and manage the demand, is we've relaunched one of our services that we have, which is more around early help. It's more around supporting children with moderate or lower level needs, or supporting schools. And we went out to consult with all partners, with families, with schools, with everybody else. We've relaunched what is now our inclusion and intervention support team. Much more targeted interventions, much clearer around meeting needs really early, not letting needs escalate and not then creating more requests for education, health and care plans. We are confident that will help us to reduce the level of requests that we get, so the requests that come in are appropriate. that service started at the start of this academic year, so we're 1 month in. And last, again, really important bits, our new case management system, which will really enable our staff. It will free up a lot of our staff's time by having a fit-for-purpose system that is more logical to use, is more effective, more efficient. It will also give us more management information. That will go live on the 13th of October. So a massive amount of work to move all of our current EHCPs onto a new system. That system is joined up with NCT as well, so we will have that one view of children and with adult social care, which I think will be incredibly helpful for all of us. If I just quickly cover number 3 as well, and then I'll bring other colleagues in if there's anything else to add. So the timeliness of plans really important. The quality of those plans equally important. There's no point us rushing plans through that do not recognise children's needs and do not clearly capture the provision that they need. So new quality assurance framework in place. The process is in place for us to be able to challenge quality and assure ourselves that there is a quality of approach and that the plans are being written in a high quality way. I'm really hoping Kim's going to tell a nice anecdote in a minute about one plan that she read very recently. I've mentioned already we've rolled out a lot of training for our staff and for staff across the partnership. When I say our staff, I do mean more broadly, about what good quality looks like in terms of advice, in terms of their assessments, to make sure that the information we are collecting means that that final plan really captures a child's needs and therefore will help secure the right provision for them. So a lot of work being carried out there. And lastly, for me, we use an online tool that we use as leaders to quality assure plans across the partnership. That is really driving the improvements in those plans, and the evidence that comes back in that management reporting to us shows that the quality of plans is improving across all areas. There is still work to do, but plans are being created in a much higher quality at the moment. Kim, am I right to pass straight to you?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I did read a plan, not last week, the week before, and I actually did email in to check dates because I worked it out 4 times and didn't quite believe it. But there was a plan that came to me, just happens to be a child that I knew, and it was finalised on the 20-week statutory deadline. And I must admit, reading this plan, I could see the child. I could see the child in those words, and that's a long time since I've been able to do that. You could actually look and see exactly what this child needed, exactly what was going forward. I think 2 key things over priority action 2 for us and 3 is 1, the Envision audits, but we've also started doing some live audits because one of our queries was if we're auditing plans that are already finalised, but what impact is that having for the child? It doesn't actually impact the child. It teaches us for future, but that child that we've audited, we're now starting to do live audits so that they can be done on a draft plan and the plan can be edited. Not all, because that's not physically possible, but some. So there's learning going on and impacts and outcomes for children. And then the other thing was on the Priority Action Plan 2, the new case management system, parents will actually be able to create an account and see the process as it's going on. So if the educational psychology report comes in, they'll see that that's come in. If the paediatrician report comes in, they'll see that that's come in. Now, from our point of view, for families, I think that makes a massive difference. For example, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, I came across a family where there was 2 pieces of advice missing, but nobody had joined those dots. So the family knew that those professionals should have given advices, but the EHC team obviously don't know that child personally, and it wasn't until the draft plan came in and the parent went, well, what about these 2 key pieces of evidence? And of course that then caused delays. But families will be able to see that in real time and be able to step in, and it will stop the delays and stop the support being delayed.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Miranda, I don't know if there's anything you want to add as well.
Before I go on, obviously, to priority 4, it's, I think there's a recognition nationally and locally that the waiting times, we're dealing with long waits. But just looking at the way we've laid out the priority action plans, there's something like, it's the foundation being laid and getting the EHCP, which is the Education Health Plan, right and in a timely manner, at least equips education, it equips health, it gives confidence in those that are working with families to be able to interpret what the child actually needs and how to provide for it. So we couldn't do even part 4, priority 4 or 5 without having the right infrastructure and the right governance. So that's that on here. Do you want me to just continue? Yeah. And my name is Miranda again, and I'm a Director of Nursing in the ICB, and we're working in partnership on the SEND agenda. And I want to recognize the place that we find ourselves in. It's not easy for me to sit here and hear your view because it moves me as well as an individual. And I also work in health, and our aim is to be working to those timelines. So I'm going to present the journey that we've taken in understanding our waiting times and what we are doing. About a year ago, we set out to understand what our community pediatric services looked like. So we did a whole review of pediatric services. And one of the key findings from there is that to be able to tackle one of the biggest issues that we have, which is the waiting time, we need to think about transforming our community pediatrics. And the notion has been to plan community pediatrics in Northamptonshire in such a way that we have a single provider of community pediatric services. And that is one of the main programs that the ICB is now looking to. But we didn't stop there because we had to start to tackle our waiting list and understand our waiting list. So working in partnership with all the providers like NHFT, NGH, which are the health providers that actually assess children who are on the waiting list. The ICB early on put in an investment because a lot of it has to be driven financially. So there was an initial financial investment with the aim of we've got speech and language waiting times, we've got mental health comes waiting times, and we've got neuro developmental assessment waiting times. There was an injection of just under $500,000 into speech and language, and in that we managed to recruit posts into NHFT to try and start to re-energize the waiting list. That in itself has landed us to at least recruiting 12.6 whole-time equivalent, and we have started to see the speech and language waiting time improve. In terms of mental health services, we've also undertaken some work to look at how do you reinvigorate your service in an innovative way. And with that, we've also started to look at, to see trends coming down. With mental health services, it's about working with the VCA, voluntary care sector, and there's a lot of that's going on. There's a lot of work that is ongoing around making sure that our front door into mental health service will be so robust that it capitalizes on all the other services that provide some mental health input that are in existence in the system. A few months ago, there was further financial investment by the ICB into addressing neurodevelopmental assessments. And this was around £1 million to look at how do we address the ADHD, ASD waiting times and start to provide a service to those families that are really struggling. And that program is underway as I speak. And I think we've already mentioned that as a partnership, one of the key things that we've recognized is that this is not a single health only issue. It is how do we as a partnership work together to address, the waiting times, hence the, shared information sharing agreement that will allow us as a partnership to start looking at your waiting list, my waiting list, and start to provide and offer targeted support as we move on. It's also important to note that education holds the the brunt in here. They kind of are the pillars when it comes to children and young people, because, you know, you can be on a waiting list in health, but you are not on a waiting list at school at most times, so you are in school. So there's the PINS program, which is Partnership for Inclusion and Neurodiversity program. It's a program that's there to equip education staff in how to manage needs for children and families, and to support keeping children in schools. So the PINS program, we had the first year, which we rolled out to approximately 20 schools, and we're now in the second year. So you kind of have the schools that have gone through the program who are now on an embedment stage, and you've got a new cohort of schools that are coming. I think it's a powerful tool if we can continue in the legacy of PINS in terms of equipping us as a system to be able to manage our the needs of our children when they're in the school setting. So one of the things that we also have done as a partnership, which kind of moves into the Priority Action 5, links a little bit to some of the work around joint commissioning, is the jointly commissioned approach to speech and language. And this has been between the council and the ICB. So we've both put money in together. We've been on a journey of learning from other systems that have done things differently and succeeded in this area, which is LLR. And what we have done with that is we have had a soft launch. We've gone out to recruit for speech and language therapists that will work predominantly on this Part F of the Priority Action Plan. And the soft launch is started now. We are at 50% capacity of recruitment, and the plan is that, hoping that as we move into the months to come, that will be fully fledged. And at the moment, we've started to see EHCP plans coming through into this Part F for us to start to action and to plan the support that will be in place. A lot of this has been driven and could not have happened if we didn't have digital advancement to a lot of the work that we're doing. As health, we started a journey where we had to start to build on our dashboards, separate our data north and west so that we understand the needs of the children, and this is where we are. Like Ben and Mel said, the chair of the board, Maruno, is keeping us, keeping us on our toes, where we are literally in a place now where we're working towards clear trajectories of saying by such and such we will be able to have reached this part of a waiting list. So it's keeping the foot on the pedal, recognizing that it's a journey that we're taking, and working towards a single community provider as well. Thank you.
I think Councillor Chauhan had a question.
Yes. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That was a really good presentation, and it's really clear to see that a lot of improvements have been made. So really pleased with that. I was just writing a couple of notes as I was going, so I'm going to flip through a few of these bits. You mentioned sorry, where are we? So you mentioned that for the educational psychology backlog, that the assessments, I think 80% have been pushed down to 6 weeks. The remaining 20%, what's the waiting time for those? So that's my first question. And the other question was, we did have a lot of issues with gaps, timelines, getting the needs assessments for various things, including mental health. So when those young people were under CAMS, they would have eventually transitioned into adult services, adult mental health. For those people that have been missed as children who are now under the adult system, who might have not had the support they needed while they were under children's, are we linking in with adults to ensure that those young people are still again getting the support? Because it's apparent that there is a gap between children's services and all of a sudden they put in adults and there's no bridging kind of service in between that. So are we addressing that, number one, because they're both very, very different in the way that they operate. And the other thing was, so a waiting time for a mental health assessment, what is that at the moment? And a very simple one, what does SALT stand for? I don't know what that means. Thank you.
Do you want to do the health one?
So I can,
Just looking
yeah.
at the figures for the education psychology. I'm hoping I can find it because I've got them somewhere.
Okay, so I'll need, obviously, unless if you've got my last report for send, to look at the data for speech and language. However, speech and language therapy, apologies for abbreviation, that's SALT.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now that you've said it, thank
Yeah.
you.
And in terms of the mental health services, one of the things that we know currently is the first thing that mental health did, without looking at my numbers, is they have got 2 waiting lists. So you've got the initial waiting list, which is when you're waiting to get onto the initial, to be seen or to be triaged. And based on that, you go on to what we call secondary waiting list, which is now a waiting list where you've been initially assessed, you rightfully need the service, and you're waiting for a CAMHS clinician to be able to work with you. So in order to address where you've got children at the cusp of moving into adulthood, and to also address the acuities, the intention was predominantly on how do we reduce the secondary waiting. So there were NHFT, which are the main provider for that, did some transformation work. Looked at resources, looked at processes, and what that meant is that they were able to move resource into the secondary waiting, and we now have a situation where we are now working with them to say, your secondary waiting, people are getting seen sooner, and let us now work towards your balancing that with your initial waiters. So that was in recognition of children do, move on off the waiting list when they turn 18. However, from a mental health perspective, the agenda is become flawless for health now, because mental health is overseen by what we call the provider collaborative. So they do, I don't want to use the word old age, because it's a team where you've got those that provide or commission children's services, but then you've got those that are specifically there for adult services. But there is a continuum, because the mental health agenda is overseen by the collaborative. It's no longer you are for health, you're in CAMHS and that's it when the door closes. But because you've got a mental health collaborative that has its own governance structures in place to hold them to account for their waiting lists. I think those were the 2 for health. Then you asked for the SALT numbers. The data.
I don't think it was SALT. I was asking
for CAMHS.
No, it was the waiting list for mental health.
Okay.
Right, okay. Shall I update you on the education psychology? So in terms of education psychology, we're obviously a few weeks behind for the data. So the August data, EP, education psychology assessments were done within 10 weeks. Okay. So for that 20%, we're looking at 10 weeks. But Kim's just reminded me, actually, I was looking at the data, we're on 100%.
I've got a feeling, actually, we had
currently.
board last week, and I've got a feeling, actually, the report was that they were on 100%. So every single educational psychology assessment was done within the timeline. That's actually had a secondary impact as well, which is positive. They've now just launched a third service, I'm not sure how many they do, that means that the schools can actually buy in a service to train staff and how to support the children within school as well. So the schools, because obviously most of them are academies, the schools will get their budgets, they can choose to buy this service back in, and they've got a couple of different packages depending on what your needs are. And I would say, I can't remember the figures, but I was at the Senko network meeting and I was like, that's actually pennies per head. If you're looking at a cohort of 30 children, you're looking at sort of £20 a child.
have expressed much of an interest in that?
I'm not sure. I was in the meeting where it was advertised to all of the Sencos. I say advertised, it was a presentation, and that was only last week, so I would have to check back with the Educational Psychology Service.
And I think the other thing to add to that is the reason that we've been able to catch up with the education psychology is because there's been a significant financial investment, and that's on the back of the increased demand. So we've had increased demand in terms of our assessment requests over the last 6-7 months. So we've had the increased demand, but we've also managed to improve on the timescales. So I think that's important as well to give the wider context.
Okay, thanks very much.
I have Councillor Baker.
Yeah. So the mental health waiting times, I'm using a baseline of January 24. So for January 24, for instance, we were having a demand of something like 240 children on an initial waiting list. The latest data is based on July 25, with about 365 children on the same waiting list. But in January 24, children are waiting for 14 weeks before they get their first assessment. But in July 25, they were at 9 weeks before they get their first assessment. So in terms of moving towards the health trajectories of waiting times, we are on track and we are achieving that. At the moment, it's at 18 weeks, so we are half of that. And I think that's attributed to some of the transformation work. It's then in secondary waiting, what we are seeing now is a waiting time that was at 54 weeks, secondary waiting, and is down at 30 weeks. And there is trajectories, like I said, that the board chair is holding us to account in setting the trajectories. How are you going to get to, for example, 18 weeks, and what steps do you take to do that so that they're meaningful and sustainable and we're able to achieve that?
Sorry, just one more question supplementary to that. Those wait lists look really long. 54 weeks is a long, long time for a child that's probably in a mental health crisis, and you can imagine that that would just completely escalate and they would need more services. What's being done to basically reduce that, number one, but number two, you did mention some support that's been given in between. What does that look like? What does that support look like for those young people and those families that are going through that?
So I'll start us off, and Mel and Ben, Kim, feel free to add in. There's been a big piece of work that's being done across our system, and it's been looking at what services are mapping, number one, because we do have a lot of services in Northamptonshire that are there to support in terms of needs. But we've been doing a piece of work to map the services, to be able to bring them together, to be able to ensure that they're on a portal that's accessible for families, that if you're looking, for example, for potty training, you don't have to struggle to find out where you get it. So that piece of work has been done and completed, and it will be going on different digital platforms. NHFT, the mental health provider in itself, they have got what they call a waiting well offer, where they do monthly contacts. So addressing that question that you raise around, if somebody's in crisis, what else do you do? And because they have that offer, that will allow clinicians to be able to assess and support and signpost or see, depending on acuity. They also have the link-ins with voluntary care sectors as well. But NHFT, as far as speech and language, mental health, they have got a robust offer of support. But as a partnership ourselves, we have now been able to map our support and make it easier for families to access support within the county.
Fiona, Councillor Fiona Baker.
Thank you. It seems an awful long time that we've been waiting for this liquid logic. In this council, things seem to grind very slowly. And I know that it had to go into adults first to make sure it was working, and then it went into the Children's Trust to make sure that was working. So I'm really delighted that at last we've got to the stage where you're going to have it. A couple of questions, really. When we've done all these assessments and got everything up to speed and we're on the 20 weeks, are we sure that we have enough capacity to enable SEND children to get the right school once their assessment has been achieved? That's my first question.
That's a very big question, because I think there's a lot of different parts to this, so it's not just for us it's about the early intervention as well. So obviously we know about family hubs and some of the work that we're doing around that, and we'll talk about Best Start in Life in a minute. I think it is about providing the right support at the earliest opportunity, and Kim has mentioned the Senko network. It's around how do we equip the workforce in schools, in mainstream schools. It's around what do we mean by inclusion. Do we have to make sure that we have sufficiency in terms of our specialist provision for those children that really need it, and we're doing a lot of work around sufficiency, and it links into our joint strategic needs assessment. I think and it also depends on national policy. So I think there's a much bigger, so it isn't an easy question for me to answer, but it's one that we constantly think about. And the honest answer is, I don't know, because I don't know what the policy direction is going to be. In terms of what we're doing, we're looking to support the children that we know about, and equally our principal education psychologist and our head of SEND, what we're looking at is identifying those children at the earliest opportunity. So we've done some really good work between education and health services about identifying those children that when they're born, if they've got significant needs, and actually supporting those children in a transition process to go into nursery and primary school in mainstream schools, or equally it helps us to plan for the future in terms of complex needs and the type of provision we will need, and in particular the areas that we would need. I know that's quite a long answer, but it's a really difficult question for me to answer honestly, if I'm perfectly honest.
I've just got two more questions, is that okay? The first one is, we've worked really hard to get the extra staff in your team to support this. Are they full-time staff, or are they temporary or agency?
They are all full-time staff.
Good.
And I think that's one of the things that I would certainly say that's been really good for the team. We have permanent staff. We have a really great workforce that work their socks off. And I think the other thing that I wanted to say, I know that we've spoken about all of the positives, we've spoken about the progress, and I'm confident as the Director of Children's Services we are making progress. However, I know that families aren't feeling the impact of that. And I think it's really difficult in a meeting like this to talk about the positives, because I know that families aren't experiencing that.
Yeah.
We know some are, but we know all aren't. So I just wanted to make that point as well, because there's so much more that we need to do. And it's important, obviously, that we keep the momentum going.
And my last question is for Miranda. I'm sorry about this because I haven't met you before, but following the first assessment, when you then decide whether they need mental health support or not, how long do they wait until they get to the second assessment? First part of that question. And then I'd like you to know that I know many young people who have been through that system with severe anxiety, for example. And I find it, now I think about it, and I apologise for this bit, but I find waiting well to be quite offensive, because those families do not feel they're waiting well. And mostly what they do in that situation is to raid their families' pots of money in order to be able to pay for their child to have some support, because they're not waiting well. They're very anxious children that need a lot of support. So by the time your list may be going down because people are borrowing off people here and there to put their child through private support. So what is that gap between the two?
So I do recognise that the waiting times obviously have got a huge impact in health and when you're waiting, and the interpretation of waiting well. Let's potentially say safer waiting rather than waiting well.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, because at least you've got somebody that you can escalate your concerns to if need be. One of the things with mental health, that's why there's a piece of work around developing a digital platform for mental health, because mental health in itself is quite broad, and over the years, there's been an emphasis around the CAMS, which is more your very sick children that end up being seen under the CAMS service. But in Northamptonshire, we have a lot of services under voluntary care, which talking therapies, some therapeutic services that are non-acute in the interventions. And there's a lot of, they are seeing a lot of our children. And this is something that we've brought to the board before to say, we have the voluntary care agency that is seeing a lot of our children through different therapy services within Northamptonshire, but we are not counting those waiting times because we are focusing on the acute CAMS, the ones that need potentially to have a psychiatrist, but ignoring that there's a wider dose. So the digital platform is going to help us because to streamline children better, to be able to use the resources that are wider than CAMS, I think that are currently maybe not adequately used because you don't know that you can get therapy services without coming into the waiting list, but you can. Hence, that digital support will be there. But like I said, NHFT have got a provision where they actually have call-outs. So whilst you're waiting, you're not you get reviews, as in they come back to you and they review how is your child doing. And through that, they have got their own escalation methodologies where if, let's say, I'm waiting on the waiting list and I start to deteriorate, they will be able to prioritize that kind of child.
Just to add a comment to your thoughts for the future,
Yeah.
I've spent the day with the voluntary organisations and they are struggling. Many are shutting. So I think that relying heavily on that sort of area is something we need to really consider for the future because people are not giving money to charity in the same way as they did before. So those organisations are really struggling, as they've all told me today. Thank you.
Councillor Ashworth.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to say thank you for the report. It's very, across the board, it's very, understanding where you've reached out and how you collated all the information. But I just want to point out a couple of things. We talk about CAMS and services and wait list. From my personal experience, 2 years ago, I approached CAMS and we've been waiting on the wait list for nearly 2 years. My son will be 18 next year and he will not fall within the younger category to accessing support. And in that time, we have not been seen or approached or to find out how he's doing in that time. And on this platform, my son had a breakdown recently again, and I'm having to pay for service to keep him alive. Only last Friday. And the difficulty is, we understand wait lists, we understand resources are tight, but when you've got a child who needs that support, not just my child, but all the other children, we should have some sort of follow-up. When I reached out recently to our GP, he directed us to Lowdown, and I didn't find that appropriate because Lowdown is not the place where he needs to go. And just truly, like Fiona was saying about voluntary sector services picking up, or a lot of the service support that they're giving out to people, they're not equipped, they don't have the resources, they don't have the investment, and they need support because they're already giving it unconditionally, and they are really, really stretched. I just want to take you back a little bit. Mental health wait time is mental health assessment separate to ADHD assessment. And whilst parents are waiting for the EHCP assessment, are parents being provided with advocates for a voice? Because when you've got families who've got English as a second language, They think they're on Mars. I had a lady recently come to me and she said for 8 years she's been waiting for somebody to speak on her behalf for an assessment because the school wouldn't do it. They kept saying, you need to do it, you can do it. So there's an argument there, who does it? Because parents are misguided. And when you've got a language barrier, that's huge for a lot of families. Until I got involved, things have progressed, but they don't have an advocate. And this particular family think that their child is going to recover from ADHD. But the literature the council has provided, it's all in English. And this family can read and write in their own language, and they can't even access that to understand what the process is, what support is out there, and where they can go for that support. And we may have an umbrella of loads of voluntary sector organisations, but we need a base for families like this who are struggling to understand what these conditions are in the first place. And I don't think that information is really out there for them. And if I can just mention very quickly, I worked for the voluntary sector for 20 years, and it was back in 2011 when we saw a decline in voluntary sector funding. And some of those services have since closed or are given very limited funding. If they close, the impact will be those particular families will go into crisis, and especially those families with language barriers. So as much as we collect all the data, we get all the right information, we've got to think the bigger picture. A lot of these people don't understand these processes, but they need somewhere to go, but they need advocates. They need somebody to help and guide them. And if the school is not going to be appropriate, then family hubs need to exist. I mean, I think the nearest one's in Toaster. We need something in Northampton, you know, and I know there's a mention of more family hubs coming about. We need them yesterday, because some of these families are in crisis. And the child that I was just talking about, on Monday, she ended up in hospital. She rang me to say, I can't get through to the GP, it's 6 minutes past, can you help me? And I said, ring A&E or 999, get an ambulance. She called me today, and she's in the worst way possible. And it's because language is huge for a lot of people, but they're really struggling to understand processes. And we need to understand, if they don't have the resources and the information in front of them for them to even understand, we have effectively let them down. And our town is very lucky to be so diverse, and not everyone is understanding processes, but there are some who still don't understand that. And I think, you know, we need to put them first. We really do. Thank you.
I was just going to mention that for education, not necessarily the other services, but there is advocates. It's IAS, Independent Advisory Support Service. It's a central base. We signpost a lot of parents there. And I would say we've also acknowledged the language barrier. Our website for the Parent Carer Forum is fully translatable. And we've just recently, with the new system coming in with EHC plans, it's funny that you've picked up on that particular thing. We've asked for 1-minute guides and screenshots for the new portal, because we're going to put them on our website, which is free resources for families. And once we embed them in our website, they can be translated into any language. I can't guarantee every language, but the ones that I have got friends and said, can you just check, does that translate nicely? And they've all said yes, so I hope so. Our survey, we also went out last year with our first survey, Parent Carer Send survey, and we actually asked for people, and the same again this year, we asked for people to send in to us if they wanted it in a different language. Last year we had 12 languages come in. They are all as a standard on our survey now. You can immediately translate into those 12 languages, and there's also a sign language interpreter on the front page. we will do that every year, but every year there is also a question, what language is your first language, so that we start to build that repertoire up. Last year we were asked for 12, this year we remained with those 12. Next year, if there's another 5 languages come in, it will be 17. We have, as a parent carer forum, we've recognised the language barrier and trying to bridge within our remit.
Can I just return? That's really good. As councillors on the ground, we do come across those families, and we're walking into homes and we do see this. It'd be lovely if you can share when you're doing that, so that we can go, when we go into those homes, we can say, did you know this portal is available? For me, it's all about prevention. And if I can give them the tools, they can independently take the next step.
Absolutely. I mean, as a parent carer forum, we're not allowed to be political. It's part of our grant forms. If you've worked in the voluntary sector, I'm sure you'll probably recognise that. However, what I would say is the way that we remain apolitical is any councillor that comes to us, we will engage with them. So please do. You can sign up as a professional on our membership. Please do sign up as a professional practitioner, whatever, and then you will get any notifications. Facebook membership, emails, etc. I would say we don't email often, because when we do, we want people to read it. And people are busy. We only email every so often when it's a big thing, so like our surveys, etc.
I think we acknowledge the importance of the family hubs, each and every one of us here. And there's a family hub coming to the Central Library, isn't there?
There is, yeah. We haven't got a confirmed date for that, but we're hoping it will be next year, but I haven't got a confirmed date, unfortunately. But we've got another 4 hubs or spokes that will be opening in the next couple of months, and we're just doing the communication plans. The nearest one to here will be Kingsthorpe. I think the other thing, if I may, Chair, is we've also got the one-stop shop, so I think there's something that I need to, which is in this building, just to check out to make sure information is available in the one-stop shop, so families want to access here. So I'll follow that up as well.
Thank you. Councillor Chanhard. Am I pronouncing your surname
It's
right?
Chahan. Councillor Chahan.
Sorry.
Don't worry. So just off the back of that question that Councillor Ruffier just raised, one of the biggest challenges we do come across on the ground is signposting to those services. It's like a minefield. So anything you can do to simplify that. I know you're talking about the portal and making that more accessible, but are we going to have a digital campaign around that? Because I think that education piece is really important, because some people don't even know how to contact us as councillors, let alone council services and so on. So that's really important from there as well. Lynn behind me has just highlighted that there needs to be more support around the Southfields area, Standards Barn, Bellenge, for all ages. I'm just going to highlight that on her behalf. Thank you.
Chair, I know we've got a couple more slides to go on. I know I'm really keen for that conversation to go on, which I think might help. Actually, there's a couple of other bits which I'll link into the next slides, if that's okay, Chair.
That's fine, yes. Yeah, if we move on to the next slides.
And contradict myself really quick. Councillor Ashraf, I'll send you an email in a moment with the links to WMVP, SENDIAS service, all of those things that are available that should help to signpost. And the more we can get that message out to you and to residents, the better. And obviously I'm happy to include those in the minutes, so I'll pass those to James as well, okay? Just wanted to pick on, within the inspection, we've talked through the 5 priority action areas. There were also a number of other areas that were identified that we should continue to work on. And they're listed on the screen. I know we've spent a lot of time and we've already touched on some of these. And I'm just going to quickly pick out a couple, and then on the next few slides I want to give some examples of what we have been doing around those. One of the key bits I wanted to just quickly address was one of Councillor Baker's points, and it was around intervening early and getting in early. And absolutely agree. Every single teacher is a teacher of SEND. Every single health practitioner is a health practitioner of SEND, because our cohorts, our communities have people and children with additional needs. So I'll touch on exactly what we're doing there to try and make sure that we meet needs really early and they don't escalate. There are a couple of other areas as well that I want to pick up on. One of the key bits within the other areas to focus on is around preparing our young people for adulthood. And everything that we do, we should be equipping our young people and our parents to move on from childhood into adulthood, hopefully in the most successful, independent, resilient way possible. The next slide, I'll just quickly go through a couple of key areas that we have progressed, and then I'll finish with just the last couple of bits, and then obviously happy to take more questions. So in our lovely world of acronyms, we've developed an OAP guide. We couldn't make it up, could we? Ordinarily available provision that's the provision that should be available to every single child in every single classroom in West Northants. There has never been a guide in West Northants about what really good ordinarily available provision looks like. We are now developing that with our SENCOs, with our parent forum, with everybody. That's been co-produced already. That will continue to evolve. That will immediately start to drive the standards up. Coupled with that, we call it our ranges. It's a graduated approach. So a child with a very low level of need, this is what you can do to address that need, to identify it, to address it, to improve outcomes. And then that goes up in the tiers of need up until you get towards an EHCP. Again, the reforms that we are addressing came in 2014. We only published our guide in 2023. It was 9 years late, but it's out, it's been co-produced, it is really good quality, and where we know it is being used, it is really making a difference. We've completely reinvigorated our SENCO networks. Our SENCOs are those lead SEN practitioners. Every school must have a SENCO. We're regularly getting 125 or more people attending those meetings, and that's about sharing the best practice and supporting and challenging each other to really drive that practice forward across all of our schools. It's not just educationists that come to those. Partners across social care, across health, our parents come. It's a really good professional network to be able to share ideas and share concerns as well. The PFA angle, and PFA, again, acronym, sorry, Preparing for Adulthood, we co-produced a booklet around preparing for adulthood that is in really key areas of how we work together to prepare young people to move on. Part of that's around education, part of that's about independent living, part of that's about health and living healthily. We published that guide. We worked with a lot of young people as well. That guide is on our website now, and it's really helping parents to try and navigate that transition between the world of education and hopefully into employment or into adulthood. Part of that is a lot of the work we're doing with local employers to create more work experience, supported internship, apprenticeship provision as well, so there are more realistic opportunities for young people to move on to. I've touched on a lot of the other bits in there, and I'm going to come on to the last two bits on the last couple of slides relate to the additional school places we've created. But before I get there, I want to talk about my favourite bit, because it's really exciting, I think. We touched earlier, our co-production with parents is recognised as a real strength in West Northants. We made an absolute commitment. We will not work without parents. They are an equal partner. Kim is probably bored of the sight of me because she spends a lot of time with me. We work really closely together. But what we hadn't embedded properly was our co-production with young people. So what we've created now is a shadow young people's board, and had to do this slowly and had to do this very carefully, made up of young people with additional needs that were part of lots of different groups already, lots of different support networks out there. We have brought those young people together. We now have a cohort of young people, all with their own additional needs, that we're supporting to tell us their views and their voice, not in a tokenistic way. They control what they say are the priorities. They will have a direct route into our board. And the next slide is the minutes of their first meeting as a shadow board. Now, we worked with an artist. Some people in the room will recognise the art there, because this artist produced all of our previous SEND strategy and worked with us. The artist stayed with those young people for 2 days as they are supported by colleagues across health and social care and education, and they came up with what they saw as their priorities. And you've got a copy of this in the pack. I'm happy to send it in detail. They didn't want long written minutes. They didn't want long written boring documents. They wanted to be able to capture visually what their priorities were. And these are their priorities. And it's all the things that we've been talking about already. It's being able to be independent. It's being able to work and to thrive and move on to adulthood. It's being treated equally and having their voice recognised and listened to, not being patronised and have a tokenistic voice in the corner. They want that complete openness. They want us to celebrate, and this is their language. I'm going to try and replicate it in the best way possible. They said, when you say send, remember that first word. We're special. And we are unique and different and special. That's not bad. Use our strengths and our brilliance and our expertise in our different areas. Don't say that there's something wrong, that we're not normal. Please use our expertise. These are a brilliant group of young people. They are really sparky. They've got some fantastic ideas. That group will really, really push us forwards as well. We will have access. That group will have direct access to Maroon, our chair, and to our board. They will tell us what they see as the priorities in the future. So I think really, really pleased with that work. A long way to go, and it will take time, because we need to support those young people to be able to articulate themselves as clearly as they currently are. So I just wanted to share that with you, and I love that visual. You probably will see that again, I'm sorry. And the last couple of slides just build on, there was one line in there that talked about creating 600 specialist additional places. We will actually create 719. We will completely blast that ambition of 600 with very, very minimal budgets to do that. The first couple on there, I know you people in this room will know about Tiffield, brand new school, started that journey in about 2021 before I was here, largely led by Councillor Baker. We managed to get Tiffield not just agreed within the council to get the borrowing of the funding. That's been built on time, on budget, at a really high specification, and the opening of that was one of the most joyous events I've been to in a very long time. It is already transforming families' lives. And it will make a huge difference, not short term, but sustainably for cohorts of young people in West Northants. And next door, again, thanks to Councillor Baker bending some arms and managing to get some additional Section 106 money, and thank you for that, we've doubled the size of Gateway, which was our secondary provision for children with really, really complex social, emotional, mental health concerns. That's not just now a school, that's a school with a farm, with a swimming pool, with motor vehicle access to go and work directly on cars, with a hair and beauty salon. It's a really exciting, vibrant place that is going to give a future to young people that ultimately were not in any form of education at all. So they're just two examples. Now I'll just touch on a couple of others as well. Daventry Hill, special school up in Daventry. We've managed to expand numbers there again, really creative use of buildings and of the way we work. Very quick turnaround. That is now open and it's looking fantastic, and we've already filled those places. And James, if you go on to the last couple, I'm not going to go through all of these, but you will see there is a wide variety of mainstream and special schools that we have managed to enhance, expand, to create those really specialist places for those children that we knew were waiting for those specialist places. Mel touched on slightly earlier, the answer is not just to keep building special schools. The sustainable long-term answer is to have special schools for a cohort of children that definitely need that provision. The real answer is to make sure that every single school can serve their community, and every school is a school for children with additional needs and that wider community. And that's where we expect the government white paper to really push all of us towards. I just wanted to just include that overview of the expanding education provision.
Are there any questions? Councillor Shah on
this. The Shadow Young Board, Young People Board looks amazing, and you know some of the stuff they put in here is fantastic. How did they choose who's going to sit on the board, and you know, do they have elections, or you know, how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So what we did is there were a number of recognised groups of young people already that have been running for a long time, largely through the voluntary sector. Mm-hmm. So we wrote out to all of those groups, and we said, is there anybody that wants to come and join and be part of a new group? So they were self-selected. We wrote to all of those young people and obviously to those organisations. We started with a reasonably long list. A number of young people did not want the reality of coming together with big groups of young people and strange people like me. Yeah. didn't want to do that at all. We've got 7 definites that will drive that forward, and they really will drive that forwards. There are a couple of other young people I expect to come on board because they see their peers doing it as well. I'm not interested in limiting that at the moment. If we've got young people that have a voice and are willing to share it, as long as they play by the rules that those young people have set up themselves, they will be supported to come and work with us. And the voluntary organisations and the other providers that already work with those young people are coming and supporting, so there's that continuity of care. Those couple of days in the summer were fantastic, watching those young people grow and build their confidence and build their ideas and build that understanding that they will shape the future. It really, that's the thing that reminds you why we all do the job. It was really rewarding, fantastic thing to do.
Thank you.
Sorry, ma'am.
No, thanks. If I could just add to that as well, the young people have also asked to come in and meet our SEND teams to understand how we work, which I think is brilliant and illustrates, you know, from that first meeting where their thinking is at.
Yeah.
So that's something that we're looking to arrange as well, so they can come in and meet the staff, understand how things work.
Works.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good.
As well.
Thank you.
Actually, sorry, Chair, just to follow on one last bit on that. Not just me, but I did, and a number of other officers, we had an assumption in our mind that the worst thing you can do is we have a shadow board and we'll invite one young person to come and sit on our board and just listen to us boring people talk. We thought we wanted to do it differently. So we asked them how they wanted their voice heard, and 2 of those young people said, I want to come to your board and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to tell you lot all exactly how it is. We said, okay, fine, if that's what you want. So we walked in with a presumption of what we thought they might want. We would go to them, we would listen, we'd take it back. No, they want to come and they want to be part of that board and they want to listen and they will be active participants in that board. Fantastic. They've got that will to give their voice forward. It's really powerful.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? No. Okay, thank you for that presentation. So we will move on to... Sorry.
So the committee's obviously heard a deal of information and members have questioned and challenged back. There's an opportunity, as far as the committee wishes to do so now, to say what outcomes it may want to identify from the item, whether that's any comments, any recommendations the committee may want to identify, and that doesn't need to be calling for something different. It can be, you know, expressing confidence, satisfaction, reassurance in what you've heard this evening. Whether there are any further pieces of information the committee wants arising from this, and whether there is any further scrutiny that the committee thinks may arise from the item. And just on that last point, although it's kind of the opposite of what I just said, in the informal meeting that the committee previously held to help shape its work programme, it was suggested that an update on SEND be included in the work programme as a standing agenda item. Just to be clear, is it the committee's wish that this not be brought to the meeting on the 20th of October, given I'm anticipating there would be very little additional to say that you've heard at today's meeting?
I think maybe the best way forward is to maybe have a show of hands, have a vote on that as committee members.
Sorry, did I misunderstand? I think, were we not supposed to make suggestions?
We are, yes,
yeah,
but
okay.
I was just going to put it to a vote that we have a show of hands whether we would like a SEND update in our next committee meeting or whether we feel we've got enough information.
Sure.
For the time being. So
yeah.
So the show of hands if we do not want to have an update on SEND at our next committee meeting, given that we will have other work programme proposals. So if we do not want to have a SEND update. Okay. I think in that instance then we will obviously have an update in the next meeting on the 20th.
Chair, if I may, it would be helpful if can we be specific in terms of what the update required is, if that's okay? Because I think we've shared quite a lot of information this evening.
Yes,
We don't need to repeat what we
No, not at all. I
The
think
next committee is in 2 weeks.
yes,
Just
that's
to-
right. Yeah, because we couldn't have our meeting on the 6th. I appreciate that our meeting is very close together on the 20th.
I misunderstood. Sorry. So we've got the meeting in 2 weeks' time. We've
That's
just
right.
had one this week, so we don't need a send update in 2 weeks. No. So I agree. We don't need one in 2 weeks' time.
Okay. In that instance, then we'd take it as a unanimous that we won't have a send update. And now, really, it's to think of if we want to bring any of these items we've heard to scrutiny, or whether we want to, raise any positive comments to the officers. Yeah, Councillor Ashford.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say it's amazing being a councillor and on the ground seeing the residents as we do, but behind the scenes I really appreciate all the work that you do. Believe me, you've got a hard task to please so many people, and you plod on and you carry on doing what you do, and sometimes you may come across people who are never going to be satisfied, whatever you do. But I just want to say, as a councillor and a resident of Northampton, I really appreciate everything that you do for the families and the children. And the children are our future. And I am in my own community alongside the other community leaders, literally as we speak, bringing them together to hold them to account, how they are feeding information to their communities. And I want to know how they're doing that, because it's those communities that fall through the gap, and we need to be on the ground to be able to bring that voice forward for them if they're not ready to come. But I am hoping that they will be ready soon. But you are on the right track, and I just wanted to say I really appreciate everything that you do. Thank you.
Councillor Chanhan.
I'd also like to echo what Councillor Ruffier has just mentioned as well. It is a very difficult job, and I can imagine what it's like. We've got parents that are completely distressed contacting you all the time, and how that works. But what I would like to see in the way of an update and look at progression with is looking at that portal that you mentioned and the impact that that's having, and how many people are reaching out from, as a result of that. How are we easing people's usage, and how we signpost them. So it'd be good to have some active feedback from the users of that service. So that's number one. I think the waiting list that was shared about the mental health assessments, I think that they're quite alarming. I know we're in this situation at the moment where obviously COVID has had a backlog. There are many different types of, different scenarios that have led to that situation. But I would like to see what we're doing to try and alleviate that. So, for example, are we looking at staffing restructures? Are we looking at prescribing nurses, for example, being able to medicate people that need that urgent support when it comes to medication, rather than just psychiatrists? It'd be good to see how the service is kind of being restructured to enable more support to more people quicker, because I think that's one of the things that I've been hearing is actually they have to wait for a psychiatrist appointment, and that delays it even more. Whereas if there are nurses that can give that same medication, that could be a way of alleviating it. I'm not a health professional, but this is just something that I've heard, so I'm not going to say that I know what I'm talking about when it comes to, medication and helping people through that. But I just wanted to suggest that. Thank you.
Councillor Trolley. Do we have any more questions? Mel?
Yeah, if I could just thank members for comments, and as I said before, we've got a really, across all of our organisation, staff that work incredibly hard, so thank you for those comments, and we will pass them on to our staff group, so thank you.
Definitely.
So I think, Chair, by way of a summary, there seems to be general recognition from the committee of the work that's been done to make the progress that's been reported to you tonight. I think there was a point made about seeing the impact of the portal, and that might be something that the committee could potentially pick up if it has an update on this item to its December meeting, I think is the next one after October. I suspect that the issue of waiting for mental health assessments is a different topic in a way, and so there's scope for the committee to pick that up as part of its general work programme if it chooses to do so. It's certainly something that this committee's predecessor has looked at in previous years to quite a degree of depth.
I think that's quite conclusive. I just wanted to mention with the waiting lists in mental health, with the joint data sharing, if there was anything, done with social prescribing for children. We all know that being in nature is a wonderful antidote for any of us, and particularly for children that may be suffering from mental health, whether that was linked in at all.
I was going to say there was a pilot last year for some children that were struggling. They were on a waiting list and that they were struggling and identified as struggling more, and they were offered some forest school sessions. I would say I was quite shocked. They actually weren't taken up that much. So I do know that it's definitely on the health agenda though, and it's definitely being looked at, like why weren't they being taken up? What was that barrier? What was that blocker? It is definitely on the table. Any suggestions? Obviously, I sit in those meetings as a parent, carer, family rep. Any suggestions, please contact us and I will make sure that I represent. I'm not sure if the councillors actually realise what our role is. Our role is to voice the family's voice and to challenge decisions at a strategic level on behalf of families. So please do signpost your families to us, get their voices heard at that strategic level.
Thank you. That's really worthwhile, and I'm sure all of us, each one of us as councillors, can be speaking to families in our wards and putting their voices forward. Thank you. Okay, so we will move on to item 6, and again invite Ben Pearson to talk to us about the early years, giving every child the best start in life report.
So colleagues, I'm really sorry, but this one is me. So don't get to have the joys of Miranda and Kim and other colleagues coming in. I would like to start just very quick. We don't have our early years lead here, who is the absolute expert. She cannot be here this evening. I will give an overview of this. It's an area that's obviously within my portfolio. I am not the absolute expert in early years. So if there are any really detailed questions, I won't try and answer them. I will take them away and get you an answer, but that I won't be able to provide an answer. What I plan to do just quickly in the next few slides is to give that overview of the Best Start in Life strategy, which is the government strategy. I'm going to focus on 2 specific areas this evening. What I'm not going to do is go in and talk a lot about family hubs, because I know we've talked about them quite a bit already in here. I'm sure there may well be questions that allude to how family hubs are part of the response as well. I'm going to talk a lot more around the education elements and the quality of education and what that looks like. So, quick introduction. Back in July, the government launched their new Best Start in Life strategy. I've included the link in there. Very, very clear ambition, and one that I think it would be very difficult to disagree with. If we get it right for children at their youngest age, we set them up for success, we have to invest early. And that early goes from pregnancy all the way up to when children start school. So when we're talking about best start in life, we're really looking at those first 5 years of a child's life and of their parents as well. And it's around supporting not just children, but parents as well. Massive amount of evidence of children that have the right support in early years are able to start school ready, and they will accelerate and they will make progress very quickly, not just academically, but socially, emotionally, physically as well. So huge recognition that early years is really, really important. And I'm going to say at the beginning, and I'll go on to break some of this down, what this is not is free childcare. This is about equipping our children to be able to learn, to be able to self-manage, to be able to work with their peers as well. This is not just about free childcare. I am going to go and talk about childcare a bit as well. James, you're right to move on to the next one. So long-term view, big strategic importance. If we get this right, we know it has a big difference. And as I said, not just for those children, but for families as well. I've put in there some of the headline measures within the government strategy. This obviously isn't all relevant to West Northants because we don't have 1.5 billion being invested in our part of the world, sadly. Key bits that I wanted to pull out there, this is around physical access, but it's also around that digital support platform. And Councillor Ashraf has already raised that today, that importance of information and being able to signpost quickly to where support is available. Those two things really at the heart of this sort of national policy and the national policy direction. James, you're right to move on. So, there are 3 pillars to the strategy. First, top one, I'm not going to go into detail about tonight. That's really about rebuilding and expanding family support services, which will be family hubs within West Northants, which we've discussed already. Happy to take sort of questions there. I'm going to really focus on enhancing access to early education and childcare and raising the quality of practice. Thanks, James. So, what are we already doing? You're right to move on to the next one. Sorry, James, it's got a few slides here. So, hopefully some colleagues will be aware of this, the increased eligibility for families to get that childcare, that early years provision for children under statutory school age. So from last April, 15 hours funded childcare. Really massive difference this can make to families having funded childcare and the difference that can make for families to be able to go back into work and to be able to get children to start learning and start playing with peers, etc., in a more structured way. From last September, that 15 hours moved down to 9-month-olds, and again, funded for some families that were eligible. And from this September, that final phase, which is up to 30 hours of free work, of free childcare support, that's about getting children in early and supporting their transition to start and move into school. So, huge expansion, enormous amount of work for us to do behind the scenes. That's supporting our childcare network, making sure they've got the staff, making sure they've got the skills, making sure we're advertising and promoting this to families, making sure families know what that means, and making sure we can actually get the families that need that provision into provision. So there's a real sufficiency challenge for us to ensure that there is enough provision out there across the piece, accessible, which in a really big, broad area like West Northants brings a challenge to us. But I'm going to go through and just talk about exactly how we do that. The last thing I just want to say is really important. This is around term time provision. So this is 38 weeks a year. This is mirroring the school term. This is not 52 weeks a year. And that's one of the questions we get a lot. So I just wanted to really emphasise that point as well. Thanks, James. So just giving a quick overview there and tried to give that visual overview of what the different entitlements are around the different eligibility for families. Really important that we have that offer, and we are promoting that offer, but particularly to families that are eligible for that early support from that 9-month plus. Thank you, James. So next bit, this is not for families. This is about the way that we support providers. So At the moment, the council, all councils in the country, we receive funding that comes into us that we are then responsible for agreeing how we allocate that out. When I say we, that goes through our schools forum. So officers present options to leaders of schools, of colleges, of early years providers as well, and they vote on exactly how the formula and how we break all that funding up. The principle that we take in West Northants, I believe, is the right principle. Every penny that we can passport out to providers, we passport out to providers. There is an opportunity for us to top slice. We have to do an element of that because that funding pays for our team that makes sure these guys get paid and make sure that people know it. But we push out as much pot money as we possibly can. At the moment, that is 97% of any money that we get. So I'll just, again, I think that's a really important message. Everything we can possibly do to support early years providers, we do financially. And within this slide, it just pulls in some of the elements that we can change and that we can provide in a bit more detail. And a lot of this is around, linking to our earlier discussion, it's around different levels of funding that can support children with additional needs really early. So we provide, there are 4 different examples there of how we provide additional funding to recognise the needs of and the cohorts of children that are currently in early years. We try and push all of the Disability Access Fund, the targeted SEND funding out to make sure if we identify needs as early as possible, if we get the right provision in for those young people as early as possible, they're far more likely to come and hit the ground running once they get into primary school. What we don't want is primary schools suddenly realising that, sadly this does happen, children have been undiagnosed in those early years, or, I mean, I've not here, thankfully, in previous authorities, I've worked with children at the age of 12 and 13, nobody has picked up the fact they're deaf. Because they've managed to go under the radar and they mask and they're quick. And let's do that really early, because actually if we get that provision and that support in early, that's a very extreme example, obviously, but we know we can put the right provision in and we'll support that young person to move through. Let's not let those needs escalate. So just an example of the different ways that we fund providers, and I'm conscious there is a lot of technical detail in here, and certainly in the next couple of slides. On the next slide, just wanted to give an idea of the scale of the operation that we're talking about. So currently, we have nearly 450 different providers in West Northants. Some of those are really big. Some of those are maintained nursery schools that have hundreds of children and they run pretty much like schools. Some of those are childminders that have 1 or 2 children in. We have to provide the same support and advice and guidance and a consistent level of funding to all of those because it's around children, not where they are supported and educated. And you've got there a breakdown just of the take-up, which again gives an idea of the scale. We're talking about 11,500 children that we are supporting in early years at the moment and ensuring that those children get the right level of support and that those providers get the right level of support as well. So it's a huge operation and it's spread across every community in West Northants. You have to move. Thanks, James. There's some really detailed bits in these slides, and I'm very conscious you've sat and you've listened to me for a long time, so I'm not planning to go through all the minutiae of all of these numbers, but I'm happy to answer questions on them if you need to. What I would like to do on the next slide, which is another one with some tables on, is just pick out, and I am conscious there's some really complicated bits in here, and some of it's got far too many acronyms in. What we wanted to do here was just show the take-up of early years provision and broken down by individual areas, just to show the difference across West Northants. And I'll talk about how we are really promoting this take-up. And we are ahead of the game in terms of the percentage of eligible families that are taking this up. I really wanted to draw people's attention to the far right-hand column, which I think gives a really good example of the different percentages of take-up. If you look at the top 5 groups which are in the town of Northampton compared to the rural take-up. And there is a really, really big difference there. I have a view about why that might be. I'd welcome that might be somewhere that you may want to dive into. I just wanted to draw that to people's attention because it is not a consistent take-up across the patch. And that's replicated nationally. That's not us as an outlier at all, but that's an area that I immediately look at, and I just wanted, again, I wanted to draw your attention to quickly. if it's okay, I'll carry on through and then I'll come back and obviously take any questions that colleagues have got. So that's the first of those areas within the strategy, and that's really around how we are creating more places and more access to early education and childcare. The third pillar is about raising quality. And again, we touched on this in the SEND discussion earlier on. Create lots of extra places, fine, but they've got to be high quality if they're going to make a difference. So big investment from central government to drive incentives for early years practitioners. At the moment, early years staff are paid incredibly low. That is incredibly low funding and salaries. We know we have had a number of early years providers close. And anecdotally, the message is we can earn more going and working in Tesco's. That's horrendous. These adults support and educate our children at their most vulnerable early age. We need to be really supporting and rewarding those staff. So that investment nationally will make a huge difference. What I'm really pleased that it isn't is you need to pay your staff more, but centrally we're not going to give you any money, so we need to find that. It's great that that's coming centrally and being driven top down. On the back of that, there will also be increased inspection frequency. Now, most people see this as a real negative. I see this as a real positive. Ofsted and inspections are a part of our continuous improvement as a sector. Ofsted come in and are not the big bad wolves to tell people off. They are there to support and to drive improvements in the sector as well. Having more frequent inspections will be really, really helpful, I believe, and it makes sure that everybody is continuing to drive the standards of the quality of care that they provide. There'll be that professional register and career framework, again, really, really helpful. This is a career you come into and you can and you should be able to enhance and develop your skills and progress within this sector. It's not a sector that's going to go away. I hope we will continue to have children and they'll continue to need to be educated and supported. And following that big investment in that training and workforce development, and Nuffield early language intervention is very, very well researched, really, really strong evidence base behind that. Lastly, on this, massive focus on improving identification and support for children with SEND in early years. And again, I think a real clear join up with everything we talked about earlier. Part of that is by using specific additional funding that will go into those providers with more children with those additional needs. So quick overview of what we're already doing. So we already provide a lot of continuous professional development out to the early years sector. We do that completely free of charge. It does not matter if you are a one-person childminder or a massive maintained nursery school. We want everybody to come together and to develop their skills together. And there's a really good programme delivered by really highly skilled early years professionals where we offer that support to the sector. And the take-up of that is improving. We've got more to do to reach those providers who cannot release their staff because their staff have children with them all the time. And you've got very tight ratios of the way you provide support in early years. So we're looking at twilight sessions, we're looking at evening sessions to try and engage as many people as we can. And a big focus in the moment on that, in that CPD offer and that support offer is around SEND, and it's around the expertise of our professionals internally, providing that support and expertise down to early years around those more vulnerable children. So just an example, that's one example of what we're already doing. James, you're right to quickly flick on. Just to quickly link this into the education world, and then I'll then I'll go to that slide in a moment. So once children get into school, in that first year in school, there are 12 development goals that we measure children on. It's really nice. Not long ago, there used to be 51 ways we measured children in the first year of education. We now only have 12. DfE are pushing for 75% of children to reach a good level of development by the end of that first year. And this good level of development, a lot of that is around its personal care. It is the foundations of learning and of education, as we would see, but it's a lot more holistic than that. That's the government's ambition. What I'll show you on the next slide is what we've been doing and the impact of what we've been doing over the last couple of years. So on this slide, you'll see the national averages for good level of development at the top. You'll see the East Midlands region, and then at the very bottom, our statistical neighbours, so those councils that we are most similar to. what you can see really clearly in there is in the last 3 years, we have accelerated our progress really significantly and way above national average. So we've gone from 65 and a bit percent to over 70%. That has been from that new team that we have created and that real drive around that continuous professional development. So it's bearing fruit already. I am very confident that will continue to go up. That 70% figure will continue to go up because I know we've got the right people delivering the right support to the providers. So just wanted, I thought that was a really good illustration of how we're already tackling a lot of this. James, there's one more slide and then you can, please, I'll stop talking. That's okay. So, really quick overview of the second and the third pillar there. Hopefully you can see that we are already addressing a lot of the these areas. All of this work will be captured within our Family Help Partnership Board and our Family Help Strategy. That join up of education and all of that family early help and all of our community offer as well. So we will report all of the progress on this through that Family Help Partnership Board, which is a really, I think, a really strong new board we have in place. So just hopefully that gives a bit of assurance around the governance and that we've got all the right people in place to hope to drive this absolutely critical sort of piece of our work forwards. Okay.
Councillor Tolley.
Yeah, no, it all sounds really interesting. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how you do the promotion and how you, therefore, that might link into the take-up and why we might be getting discrepancies in rural versus town.
We use every possible channel to try and promote the fact that there is this new entitlement. So obviously lots of online, lots of targeted as well, through GP surgeries, through any services. So quite often a lot of our health services, because you have that direct contact when children are really little, we ask those health services to promote, are you aware of this entitlement? The team internally, we advertise obviously their contact details, but part of the website as well that's got all this information on. And then we go out through schools and other partners as well. So schools, if you've got one child there and we know you've got a younger sibling, so we're trying to use every avenue possible. We will keep trying to use every avenue possible, particularly in those areas where there's low take-up. But very welcome to hear if there are other ways that we can get literature out into those communities, if we can use the network of obviously lots of people in this room that have lots of influence and voice within their local communities as well.
Councillor Chan-Hon.
Thank you, Chair. I used to work in the early years sector for about 10 years. I think one of the biggest issues we've got, and I'm glad you touched on it, is looking at the shortage of nursery nurses. We've got a huge shortage, and the company I work for was a huge international company, but they used to go to Spain to recruit for nursery nurses and so on. I understand the plan to retain existing staff, but do we have enough staff currently in nurses to manage the changes that are coming in the next couple of months in terms of additional children, additional hours and so on? And the other question was, I'm just going to ask them all in one go, so then you can answer them together. How much funding do we receive from the early years pupil premium altogether, as a lump sum? And the other thing was, thinking of the situation that we had in my ward in Coventry, where we're no longer building the school, considering the nursery spaces that we have, do we have enough primary school provisions for those nursery children to then move on? And how far into the future have we forecasted that demand? Thank you.
I'll try and do those in order. And I'm now conscious I'm speaking to someone that's from that sector. No, Councillor Chown, so first question around staff, do we have enough? I cannot say hand on heart, yes, we definitely have enough. Are we doing everything we can to try and promote and try and encourage to ensure that we have a sufficient offer locally? Yes. Where we've been successful is by supporting current providers and new providers. So at the moment, our sufficiency of places, I am very satisfied we're exactly where we need to be in early years at the moment. What I can't do right now is say hand on heart, yes, we've got the right quantity and the right quality of staff. I'm happy to go and get more information from our early years leader. He'll be able to give me a much clearer breakdown, and I'm happy to provide that outside of here.
I think it's more like the qualified nursery nurses. I mean, they have to be level 3 qualified.
Absolutely.
Is there any indication that the government might change some of those requirements? Because obviously they have to be nursery 3 qualified, and then they have to have a certain ratio of children, and then that impacts how many children they can have in the classroom. Are there any indications around that area?
At present, no. So the ratios in early years are very, very prescriptive, depending on age as well, and rightfully so. At the moment, that is the way that we build that sufficiency. So we know there has to be 1 to 8 or 1 to 12, and that's the way we build up. At the moment, there's no indication that that's going to change at all. That's really important. My bigger drive is the right people leading early years. So you're absolutely right to pick out level 3 qualified experts in early years and experts in the education in early years who really can inspire and create the right environments for children to grow. As I said at the very beginning, it's not childcare. It's so much more. This is a really professional area of work, but that currently I don't believe is recognised properly in that way. So in terms of staff, yes, there is a sufficiency of places at the moment, which therefore by default means there is a sufficiency of staff. Could we need more? I'd love to have more. I'd love to have more and higher quality. I'm happy to go away and get those numbers and provide those to you, if that's okay. What led on, if I do the third question then, the sufficiency then of primary school places. At the moment, in West Northants, and again this is mirrored nationally, because there has been a big drop in birth rates over the last 5 years, in particular since COVID, but also the 5-7 years preceding that, we have a quite significant surplus of places in primary education. So what's really nice to see in West Northants is that as much as birth rates have dropped, the number of children, particularly in age 4 and 5, the number of children that are now going to school in local maintained schools has actually gone up. So the number of children in primary schools hasn't dropped at the same rate as birth rates, because we're keeping more children locally. Some part of that is around the independent sector and the private sector. So at the moment, if anything, we have a different challenge of we have too many places, which is a really strange, I know it's a strange way. So yeah, I am very satisfied at the moment. There's that sufficiency in early years and moving through. You know, there are some parts of of West Northants where there's significant housing growth, where we will need to be building new education provision, and we're on that journey already, and we'll continue to do that. In terms of the specific question around early years pupil premium, that's one I'll go and ask Rayhana about, and I'll come back to you exactly. If that's so, I'm not going to give you just a ballpark.
Sure, no, thank you. I appreciate that. Really, really quickly, supplementary question is our former MP, Andrea Leadsom, did a lot of work for early years and the 1001 days. She's obviously continuing that work. Have we embedded any of that strategy into some of the work that we're doing? I know that a lot of work was done in government or the previous administration around that, critical 1001 days. Are we using any of that research in how we're working?
Yeah, a lot of that research has gone into the Best Start in Life strategy that's been taken forward by the new government, and there has been a lot of work. You're right, and being one of our local MPs, looking at that first 1001 days, the importance of and some of the key practice within there. This new strategy I see as an evolution of that work as well, and it goes a bit broader than that. So yeah, it's not been lost.
Are there any more questions? I just wanted to ask about, obviously, like deprived children. There's a lot happening in SEN and the budgets, but what about bridging the gap of the deprived families and the equality, any inequalities there?
Thank you, Chair. So when I talked through the entitlements earlier, a lot of the entitlements for free childcare, 9-month plus, are either based on low income or any child that's been looked after or previously looked after, or with an EHCP. So vulnerable children are identified very early to get that free childcare and to be able to get that provision to go straight in, which I think is wonderful. I think the challenge links back to Councillor Chowan's question as well. It's around, are they being supported and educated by the highest skilled people to really meet their needs really early? That's the biggest challenge. But the government reforms do provide that support for those more vulnerable children, yes.
I know we haven't really talked about family hubs, and I know you said, Ben, you wouldn't touch too much on that, but there's a huge area of government and school readiness, and, you know, children being ready for school in terms of cleaning teeth, being toilet trained. And I do put it to the committee that maybe we could do some scrutiny work around that. Maybe I do hope that each one of us has had chance to go and visit the family hub, or if we haven't, that we will do in the very near future. That there may be some sort of questioning as to, and this probably for another meeting or something we can think of on our work programme, you know, the courses and the support that is available to actual parents, because we've touched upon that education starts from day one, really, what starts from pregnancy. So I didn't know if you had any views on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that's a really good point, and I think maybe committee would like to look at the 0 to 19 contract in terms of what we're doing, and Strong Start, which are based in currently in Toaster, but are based across the county. So I think 0 to 19 might be an area that you might want us to come and present on, and look if there's anything further that you want to explore around that.
I think it's a really good idea.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Sorry.
Jean
Councillor
just
Chan.
left a question here very, very quickly. Okay. I didn't want it so that she couldn't ask a question, but very quickly
okay.
about hubs for after school. Basically, the suggestion was, can we have more after school clubs and look at those provisions as well?
Thank you. Yeah, after school clubs, there are schools obviously provide after school clubs, but what I will say, and again it goes back to your comment, Chair, I was at Toaster Family Hub recently, and there's a youth zone, and what was really lovely is when I was walking into the youth zone, what I saw was a lot of children going in. So we've got a specific youth area which has been designed by the young people, and it was really nice to see them just coming into the youth zone to do homework. And, you know, enjoying it. And so I think definitely what we're looking at is that youth offer. And for members that aren't aware, we are currently pulling together our youth offer strategy, which we plan to go to Cabinet in December.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah.
On there. About the after school clubs and that, I mean, I've got a child who goes to Purple Oak School, which is obviously a special needs school, but after school facilities for her was very lacking. It was lucky that Greenwood's next door would actually take this on. Is there going to be some sort of facility to provide that for special needs children as well? Because that is one thing, it's very lacking. And also during sort of half-term time, obviously there's plenty of clubs that go on for sort of mainstream schools, but again, the special needs schools are completely forgotten about, and there's no facilities whatsoever for activities and that during sort of half-term holidays.
Do you want to, if I talk about the half-term activities, and then maybe Ben, you can come in on the other questions. So in terms of half-term, so we've got the holiday activities and food, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, and we are looking at that currently, because as we know, the government have announced that that's going to continue. They announced that, I think, about 4 weeks ago. So there's definitely a focus on that to make sure that children and young people with additional needs. So I can give you assurance that that is being looked at in terms of the holiday activities.
So I was going to say, because just up until sort of recently, we've been sort of reliant on sort of the individuals like Born to Perform, the Cube, and that to provide those sort of things, but they're very limited in what they offer as well.
Yeah.
So.
And just to follow that, there are some phenomenal providers out there. You've just mentioned 2 of them that do a brilliant job. What we're encouraging schools to do is to work with those local community providers as well, to look at that extended offer. And 20 years or so ago, we used to really push extended schools as an offer of being able to have a provision that is there while parents are at work, that is designed and is targeted to meet the needs of children. That, you're absolutely right, that is lacking in special schools up and down the country. we will continue to work with all of our special schools to try and promote the importance of that and the need of that. I think Mel's right, that holiday activity offer, we know there is some specific and targeted in there. We definitely need a bit more provisions like that. And I'll continue to do that with special school heads and to try and promote that good practice that we can offer there.
Chair, if I may just add to that, I think the other issue that you raised, there is something about communication to our communities about what is already out there. So we've been doing some work as part of our development of our youth strategy about communication and where are these groups within local communities. So that's definitely something we're looking at again, because I think there's probably more out there than we all realise. And the reason that it's not being accessed maybe is partly because of communication. So that's definitely an area of focus for us as well.
Mm-hmm.
I would just echo that. Since becoming a councillor, I do thank you officers for working extremely hard to help us all. But the most heartwarming thing is actually everything that's out there. But there is a real lack of people knowing what's out there. And just as we mentioned before, I know this is not going to be discussed at this meeting, but is there any sort of thought towards like directories, putting offerings all in one place, even for the youth?
Very quick answer, yes. So I will share with James to go into the minutes if that's okay. So for any child with additional needs, 0 to 25, we have a local offer. That local offer isn't a directory or just a list of. It's advice, it's guidance, and it's all provision that's available locally. And we're constantly asking for more people to tell us what they're doing. We will promote it free of charge through our website that we try and push all the time. So I'll provide a link to that website in there. We also have other offers on. So our family information service, which is the digital backup of those family hubs as well, is being developed now. And that information is only as good as the information we have. It's continually updated, but that digital offer is a really important part of everything that we've talked about tonight, so it's accessible to everybody.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
So the local offer is the digital platform for SEND specifically. The family information service is that's a wider information service that sits behind a number of sort of council offers, and that's all information that's out there. That's the digital offer behind the family help offer.
Can I just remind us all to use our microphones? Thank you, so we all can hear.
I'm going to beat you to it. I do use the website for the local offer for a lot of the families. If there is anything new coming up, please share it with me, because I try to support the community regardless of background to become independent. But if they don't know where it is, it's our duty to make sure we guide them or say, send that information, and then they will do the rest. So if there's anything that you are coming up with, please do share it with us, councillors, because, like I said, we are on the ground, but if we don't know what's there, we can't share that with our residents.
Chair, if I can just come in, because we're definitely thinking the same thing here. So the other thing, and I think this is what I'm illustrating, is the confusion for communities, which we are focusing on. There's also a community connector newsletter that comes out that's got so much information. So I think in a way, part of the challenge is that we have got information, but where is it and where do you go for it? Mm-hmm. So that's a really good point that you've raised. And I think that newsletter that comes out every month, I'll link in with James about how we get that out to members, because that's really the most up-to-date information about what's on in communities for the following month. So, and again, I think I mentioned that the Family Help Strategy is going to Cabinet in a couple of weeks, and part of our delivery plan linked into that strategy is exactly what we've just been talking about. Communities need to know where they go to find information. What they don't want is half a dozen different places and not knowing if it's up to date or relevant. So that's definitely a priority for us.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or points to add? James.
Thank you, Chair. So, as with the previous item, there's the opportunity for the committee to take stock, identify if there's anything more it wants to know, anything it wants to do, anything it wants to say on the topic you've considered. If not, then the kind of default conclusion is that you note the information you've received. But the aim with scrutiny, I think, should always be to look to do more than that, rather than just take in information. At the risk of putting words in your mouths, I don't know if there's anything. The point was raised about involving councillors in the provision of information to the community. I don't know whether that's something that's translated from a comment by an individual member into a conclusion, a point that the whole committee wishes to make.
Sally. Sorry, Councillor Keeble.
I know I'm not here as a member, but perhaps in the light of what James said, I could just assist with this. One of the things that the committee might like to look at more is a point that you raised, and I think that Ben raised as well, which was about looking more closely at those areas where the take-up is lagging in Northampton Central and Northampton East in particular, and trying to explore some of the challenges around there, if that would be pick up on your points, Chair, and some of the other points. And I'm sorry, I'm not here to do this, so I shouldn't be interrupting.
Thank you for your input, and it's something that I'm sure we as a committee will look into. We see a gap there, and it's something that we can scrutinise and make recommendations on. Is there any more questions or points to add? Okay. We move on to item 7, and we have already started to touch upon this, but it's our committee work programme. And I invite James Edmonds to speak to us on this.
Thank you, Chair. So this committee is somewhat later than others in having its second meeting. You had the informal meeting of committee members on the 10th of July to give some initial discussion to the items that might go into your work programme for the year. What you have before you, this item is a draft work programme that hopefully captures the ideas that emerged from that session. It's subsequently been shared with the relevant service officers for them to have an input, and particularly around the best timing for prospective items to take account of corporate work, because as is the way with scrutiny, there's virtually nothing that you might identify as a priority to look at that probably isn't being addressed in some way by the council already. So the challenge then is how scrutiny complements what's being done rather than duplicating or cutting across it. So what you have for consideration by the committee is a draft work programme, as I say, intended to take the ideas that emerged from your initial discussion and shape those informed by input from the relevant service officers. Just to highlight a couple of further points. So the committee had identified smartphone-free policies in schools as an area it wanted to look at. That was obviously the subject of a motion to the full council meeting last week. That identified, that resulted in a request to the Director of Children's Services to produce guidance for schools on smartphone use, to run public consultation on this before spring term 2026, and to encourage all schools to have smartphone restrictions in place from September 2026. So the committee may well want to take that into account in thinking what it may do on that topic area. And then, as has been touched upon, due to circumstances, there is a very small gap between the meeting tonight and the next committee meeting on the 20th of October. The draft work programme for the 20th has one substantive item for the 20th of October meeting on the future delivery of social housing services currently run by Northamptonshire Partnership Homes. That may well be sufficient to produce a worthwhile meeting by itself. but just to say that if the committee does think it needs to add further substantive business to the committee meeting on 20th of October, if it could be mindful of the tight turnaround time between now and then, in which that would have to be produced. So I hope, Chair, the draft work programme before you is fairly self-explanatory and clear. I'm happy to take any questions on it, if not, but otherwise it's over to the committee to consider what's in there and arrive at an agreed work programme.
Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Chair. I think for the meeting on the 20th, I think that'd be quite a substantive item to discuss. I think there'll be a lot of discussion on that. For the item on the 1st of December, the 0 to 19 contracts was suggested. Could we tie those two together? I'm thinking because we are talking about the youth strategy in that meeting, and I think those two topics would tie in together quite nicely.
I think they would complement each other, and I would suggest that we do that. Councillor Keeble, even though you're not meant to be speaking, sorry, I didn't. I do apologise. Yes, you can.
Sorry, I did actually put in a request to speak here, so no, it's quite okay. It's been a long evening, I know. I came specifically to ask if you might be prepared to consider at your next meeting a request which came from the Labour group about having a particular scrutiny on disrepair in housing. Now, we put in this proposal. There's been some discussion because of work that's taking place elsewhere in the council on this subject. However, it is a really pressing issue for many of the people in our wards. As we know, there's around 22% of the social housing in West Northampton, particularly for Northampton Partnership Homes, failed to meet the Decent Homes test. I understand that is now, those figures have improved, so it's now 15%. That's still way outside the national average and means that housing disrepair is a really serious problem. Just to explain, I only have 3 minutes, just to explain how that looks in sort of public terms, in terms of people's housing, is, for example, Drayton Walk, which is a housing estate in Kingsthorpe South, some flats which about 8 years ago were considered by Northampton Partnership Homes to be in such serious disrepair that there were proposals to pull that estate down completely because it could not be managed. It's still there. It still has stalactites hanging down from the walkways. It still has horrendous black mould outside. I presume there's still some of the green mould growth inside. Park Walk, which John and Councillor East and Councillor Ashraf and I all know, where there's a row of flats which are all severely impacted by damp, where the mothers are in despair because they have real because of the effect on their children's bedrooms and the difficulty of use, and also thinking about a flat which I went into in Moat Place in Castle, which has got the worst black mould growth I have ever seen in my life, despite the woman taking great care about bleach and ventilation and so on. The last time I went there, she'd actually resorted to painting over the mould, but you could still see the black mould through the paint. So it is a really serious issue that affects people now. And whilst, of course, the council has to report to the regulator about what's happening, it's really important that I think and colleagues think that the council members are actually accountable and scrutinise what is happening in our social housing to some of our most vulnerable residents, and make sure that everything that possible that can be done is done. And also, of course, it's going to be a key issue for the council as Northampton Partnership Homes responsibilities migrate back in-house. There's going to need to be a real focus on making sure that in this day and age that people aren't living in really completely inadequate conditions. So I hope my request is not that there should be a decision now, but that you should look at that proposal at the next meeting and take a decision as to whether you should include it in your work programme. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can do that as a committee. I speak for us collectively. I think we need to go away and do some research into what the Cabinet is doing on that, particularly with the fact that, you know, the housing stock is coming back into the council from MPH. Councillor, I think it was Jan Hunt first and then Ashraf.
Yeah, it was just a very quick question. The meeting on the 20th of October, I think we're already covering that point because we are discussing MPH, are we not? Is that? No, it's a different issue. Okay.
Sorry.
Could you explain that, please?
Do you want me to answer that point?
You can. I think if I could just say something first, I think this is a slightly different issue. Yes, I agree that it, you know, links to housing. But yeah, yes, Councillor Keeble.
The issue about taking, I mean, there's been an in-principle decision that Northampton Partnership Homes should come back in-house. The management should come back in-house, subject to various considerations. And there will need to be a huge amount of scrutiny, which I'm sure is what you'll be looking at, around the management structures for that, the accountabilities, how the different processes will work, and how there will be hopefully a seamless transition from the one management structure to the other, because the ownership, of course, has always rested with the housing, with the council. The issue about the disrepair is actually quite a different thing, because the Northampton Partnership Homes coming back in-house will obviously take a period of time. I think it was about 2 years, wasn't it, to happen. People are living with disrepair now, and it is chronic. And there's absolutely no reason for it. Decisions are going to have to be taken about places like Drayton Walk, about what their future is. But you know, but that is a different order of challenge. It's a much more practical one. It's one which all of us as councillors come up against constantly, and which we have to be accountable for. So I think, you know, the one is a process issue, which of course you'll be scrutinising, and of course is going to be a challenge to deliver. But the other one is a practical, ongoing one of people's day-to-day living, you know, living and the realities of their lives. And I think that particularly since it's gone on for so long, no fault of the council, because Northampton Partnership Homes wasn't exactly transparent with its information, but there is a real need to make sure that people don't continue to suffer from that.
Thank you. Councillor Ashraf.
Thank you, Chair. When we talk about housing and the disrepair, we're also looking at onset of illnesses of children, and that's been my concern in our ward. And my question that I wanted to ask was, when there is a child with a diagnosis, EHCP or behavioural issue, and they're living in a 2-bedroom, and the parents are saying their children have different needs. And obviously, because they've got a child with education or healthcare plan, you can't magically create another bedroom. How do we manage that? And it's one of those questions I've actually asked the council only recently, when the parents are saying, my other children, they're all sharing a room, and this child in particular, with the behaviour, is keeping everyone up at night. And we talk about giving children space to develop and grow and all of that. How does that look and work? I mean, I don't know the answer to that one, but yeah, I'm going to just give it to you.
I think that the first thing is, you made reference to an EHCP. Clearly children, and I know you know and appreciate this, children with EHCPs don't all have behavioural issues. There are many different reasons why children have an EHCP, so I just wanted to make that point. I think it comes down to, and it's about the allocations for housing, isn't it, and how that happens. and how the needs of individual families, you know, if it's overcrowding. So I think it's not a question that I can answer fully, but it would come down to the individual needs of the family.
Sorry, I was going to ask for a supplementary. I only mentioned EHCP because that's how children are identified with certain behaviours. I know when an application goes in, it doesn't highlight they have an EHCP. I think I'm more referring to children with behavioural problem, which is impacting the whole household, and which is the property is fine, but is impacting because they're all in one room, 3 children. I mean, one particular family I'm supporting, I've never seen a 3-level bunk bed, and the child is actually on the lower bed because he jumps off or tries to swing off. And that's what I'm referring to. You know, they're squeezed into this room. There's not even space to swing a cat. And I don't know the answer to that one, but they don't have the space at all. So how do we manage that situation when the child does have behaviour, but it's impacting the whole household, but they haven't got the room in their home to benefit the whole family?
I think James would just like to add something to that, Councillor Ashraf.
Well, the draft work programme has an item on the operation of the Council's current housing allocation scheme identified. That may well be a way of picking up that point.
Chair.
Yes.
Sorry. I appreciate you being very tolerant. The issue about overcrowding, I was a former housing minister and I dealt with this. I had to deal with it. It is absolutely pathetic because the overcrowding standards were set in 1935 and have not been upgraded substantially since, only with a few minor orders and so on. And there's a real problem with them, apart from the brutality of, you know, the fact that they're inadequate. And that is precisely what Councillor Ashraf talks about, which is about the recognition of behavioural difficulties and the impact of that on space. So, for example, if you have a child with autism who's on the spectrum, who sort of, well, as I've seen sometimes, they'll walk up and down a living room all the time, so no one else can use that space, and that has a terrible impact on the entire family. And you get the same thing about bedroom space very frequently. And there's no recognition within the overcrowding requirements of the real spatial needs of a family. For the allocations policy, and this is why that won't deal with it, the allocations policy is if you like, what the council's best aspirations are, but in terms of what they then have to fall back on when there's such housing shortage, it's the statutory standards, and those are just inadequate. Now, previously, some councils did particular studies of overcrowding, and they used that to help to get some pilot schemes in place to try to get improvements on the standards. That would be a brilliant area for scrutiny, but it is an area which is a massive challenge to get government to shift on. Having campaigned about it since I first went on a council in 1986 and then as a housing minister right the way through, it is really difficult to do. But if it would be a fruitful area to look at and to push on, and in particular to recognise not just the physical needs of, you know, numbers of boys, numbers of girls, number of bedrooms, size of rooms, all that sort of thing, but also this issue about the impact, particularly of behavioural and mental health issues on the space requirements of a family. Rant over.
Thank you. I think that's something we could potentially consider as a committee.
Chair,
James.
I don't think the committee needs to be worried either that it will discuss its work programme tonight. That's it set. You won't ever be able to change it again. Quite the opposite. The work programme will be reported to each meeting of the committee, and there's each time it comes, there's an opportunity to see whether you still think what it includes are the right things. Are there any new priorities? Should something be put in? Should anything come out? And yeah, absolutely. As you get more engaged with, more informed about the topics you're looking at, that can help to guide your priorities and put you in a stronger position to say what, and particularly with what the in-depth pieces of work you could most usefully do are. So I don't think the committee needs to be worried that it needs to have all the answers tonight. The work programme you set tonight, there's scope for it to be modified when you look at it again on the 20th of October. Hopefully not all chucked out and replaced with something else, but yeah, neither is it all fixed tonight for the whole future.
I just want to add to that. The scrutiny will, as I see it, will evolve. Obviously, we need to be focused. We need to stay on track, just echoing what James Edmonds said. But I see it, and I saw it before I came onto this committee, that it will evolve slightly. We may change slightly, veering off to the left or right. But I do feel that as a committee, from what we've heard, I just encourage every one of us, if we can obviously not have all the answers tonight, but if we can look at the scrutiny review forms and, you know, go forward in that way for some focus for the next committee meeting and the further ones. Councillor Tolley.
On that, actually, I noticed obviously we've got some to be confirmed, which obviously is part of the flexibility of it. Although I noticed actually one of them is tonight, possibly having a task and finish group to do with early years. Whether we had thought that was something we were going to do, or whether that was something that is going to be again deferred. And obviously, the very last point is obviously to be confirmed on the date. And I don't know if there's flexibility there, because I noticed some things are bunched together in certain meetings, and obviously that's been done for thematic reasons and other reasons. Whether, we had any thoughts about, does that mean it's going to roll over to the next period, or is it just going to possibly fit it in somewhere else?
James.
I think the more in-depth the work that Scrutiny wants to do is, the more onus there is on it to be clear about what the focus is, what the outcomes you're looking for, what the best way of dealing with it is, and so I think where there are, so with the early years item that was dealt with at tonight's meeting, going into the meeting when the work programme was produced in advance. There was a suggestion at the work programme discussion back in the summer that early years might be a topic for more in-depth scrutiny work. So the work programme as presented tonight has that as to be confirmed. I don't think the item tonight identified anything, any aspect of that the committee seemed to want to do more on. So in that sense, it has been confirmed, proposed task and finish group. The answer at this stage, and I emphasise that, is no. That doesn't preclude the committee from saying at a later stage, we've thought further, we've identified something where we do want to revisit, or we do want to do task and finish work on. And similarly, I don't think the committee at this point needs to beat itself up if it doesn't identify timings for any topics it might do. I think it's perfectly acceptable for the committee to have a work programme that includes some things which are where the timing is identified, and some things where it's not. Items can move up or down in priority, up or down in timing. You know, you almost have a long list of things that the committee might do, and that informs a shorter list of things that the committee thinks it definitely does want to do, and it's identified the timing and the approach it wants to use for them. So,
Chair, can I just make a suggestion?
Any more points? Councillor Chan.
Yeah, it was just a quick suggestion. I think we've said for the December meeting to add the 0 to 19 strategy, and since we're discussing how this is, the priorities of the committee might change at that point, may I suggest that we leave the rest as it is at the moment, suggestions, and then we review this in the December meeting in terms of what we want to prioritise as a committee.
Absolutely, yes, yeah, and I think that's a valid point, but I don't know if James wants to add anything more to that.
Only to say, Chair, that for your December meeting, that would leave you with items on the West Northamptonshire Youth Offer, the 0 to 19 strategy, which do seem to fit very well together, and the housing allocation scheme. That would be 3 fairly substantive items for the same meeting. I'm not sure how time-specific the housing allocation scheme one is. So the idea occurred that might possibly be rescheduled to 27th of January. But as I'm saying it, I'm now thinking that 27th of January, as it stands, has a very it's a very focused meeting on matters to do with support for care leavers. So having started to suggest the housing allocation scheme might better not be dealt with on the 1st of December, I think I've talked myself out of it and suggested leaving it where it is.
Councillor Ashworth.
I just wanted to point out, can we bring the disrepair, housing disrepair to the next meeting, possibly, please?
So that would proposal for scrutiny of that, yeah.
Do we have any more points to raise on our future work programme?
I think we're saying for this for the meeting on the 20th to add that additional item
for proposal, yes. It's not to necessarily scrutinise it on that evening, but so we're all clear to add it for proposal, yes.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Okay, I think we're all happy on clear. We're all clear and we're all happy on that. Moving on to item 8 then, any urgent business, and I don't believe there is any. So that concludes the meeting.